Yes. Nods. Okay, great. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And first, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, I'm going to conduct roll call. I'm going to say that I'm here, Councilmember Palmares, Councilmember Matias. Here. And for the record, Councilmember Ledeju is not present. Randy, could you please tell me what's next on the agenda? Understood. And we have to.
Through the chair, Mr. Attorney, please unmute yourself when you're speaking into the microphone.
Sorry, Manny.
And we have to vote for that, the approval of minutes, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we are going to vote on the approval of the minutes. Councilmember Matias? Yes. I will also vote aye, and Councilmember Ledeju is absent. So that is 2-1. And then what's next, Randy? Sorry, I don't have the agenda with me.
Oh, no problem. It's Operations Bureau Monthly Statistical Report.
Okay. And who will be presenting that today?
I'll start it off. I think it'll be probably a discussion of a few different people, but I can start the presentation now.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have published the November 2025 Operations Bureau report. This is a report that's coming towards the end of the year. So as we start to look at trends in crimes and various things that are reported out on, we start to get a little better picture of what our end of the year numbers will look like. In December, we will also produce the end of year Operations Bureau report. So probably would be a good item to discuss. It's a standing agenda item. So those will really be able to look at our end of year comparisons compared to last year. So as you know, in these reports, they compare the crimes for up to, in this report, November of 2025 as compared to the same period last year in 2024. A couple of things I'm going to talk about too as I go through the presentation, which are follow-ups from the subcommittee's requests from last meeting. We included in the packet the fatal traffic collision follow-up. Also for the public and for those in attendance, we have hard copy packets that we are getting made again. There was a mistake and they were only copied every other page for the courtesy copies. The correct packet was published publicly on our website. So those will be forthcoming fairly soon. So I'll just verbal it for now. So we're going to follow up with fatal traffic collisions. That's included in the packet. We've also provided behind the Operations Bureau report for November, the requested crime breakdowns for domestic violence and for kidnapping. Oh, thank you, Manny. Oh, this is nice. Okay, we can pull it up on the screen. Okay. Additionally, I wanted to talk about, just briefly, and I'll start with this. Councilmember Ledeju brought up about crime mapping and the desire to do crime mapping. We do crime mapping on our website through a software program called CGIS. In that CGIS program on our website, you can go to our website. You click on the front icon on the opening page called Crime Data, and then click on the icon that says Crime Mapping. That allows you to look at all crimes reported to NIBRs. Those are the same crimes that are reported in the Operations Bureau report. And you can look at all the crimes that have happened in the city of Vallejo over the last 30 days. So that 30-day is it's updated every day. So it's a 30-day running tally of those crimes. They're plotted on the map. The map is populated by our police beats. There is some variance in council districts. So our crime analyst is working with city IT to potentially on our website be able to overlay, whether it be the police beats or the council districts, more for council's awareness. So we're working on that. But again, you can see the locations, you can click on the location, the type of crime, etc. It's pretty interactive. We've had that for many years. Again, just wanted to follow up from council members Ledeshu's comment from last meeting. We'll go through the crime bureau report and then we'll get to the fatal traffic collision. So, man, if you could go back to the operations report, thank you. Looking at similar call volume, our communications center took over 12,000 incoming calls for November. We created over 5,000 incidents. Fatal traffic collisions for 2025 as compared to 2024 is up. We'll talk about that after. Everything else was in terms of the patrol division, calls for service, use of force, the number of arrests. I always like to point this out. We had over 250 plus arrests last in November, and we had 15 use of force. I think that's a positive note and thing to trend to talk about. We had 16 vehicle pursuits. We had 2 officers assaulted, and we made 10 firearms, ammunition, or weapons arrests. Drawing your attention to the crime data, murders are down 35%. We are at, unfortunately, 15 murders at the time of this report. I still think at year end, and actually I'll let you chime in, Lieutenant Josh Catham from our investigations division. I think our crime trend for murder is down this year. If you want to just give the actual number.
Yes, the actual number, we ended December with a total of 17 murders.
So that's down from 23%. When we do the year-end report, we'll get a percentage trend for that. Rape, sexual assault, robbery are all down. Like we talked about last meeting, aggravated assault and simple assault is up, and that up in a percentile into the teens. Kidnapping, abduction, that number is up 11%. We also have a crime breakdown that I'll go through after this and what all those type of crimes are. There may be some questions that spawn from that. I can do my best to answer those. Burglary and larceny, which is for the public, that is the legal term for theft, are down. Stolen vehicles are down 30%. That's a significant trend as we enter into this November report. Auto burglaries and auto theft from automobiles is down 21%. Shooting cases have continued to stay in a downward trend, is down 24% through November. And domestic violence cases are still up 35%, but what sparked our second item on the agenda today, they were up, I think, 43%. So we've trended downward somewhat. I know we made some projections in our last data packet that we provided. So our projections for November and December are currently down somewhat, which is good news. But I think we have some good things to report on, some updates from our domestic violence partnerships and some things we've been doing since last public safety meeting. So I don't want to get ahead of myself too much. We are currently down to 39 officers on patrol, but as we explained in the last emergency staffing update, that is due to promotions and our ability to build out some of these specialized units like the problem-oriented police team. So you're going to see dips as we build back different specialized assignments in which we can provide better service to the community with these specialized officers. Your patrol numbers dip, and then you hope those officers come off the academy, they come off of field training, and then you replenish those patrol numbers. For those that don't know, our baseline number for patrol we want is 48, rock bottom. Ideal is 60. So that's kind of what we look at in patrol. When we could get to 48, we'll be okay. If we really want to provide optimal service with good response times, we want to get to 60. So those are just some ideas for those numbers.
DC Knight, may I ask a question at this point?
Sure.
So 48 to 60, did you come to that number? Is that relative to the population?
Oh, no. That the officers per 1,000 population, that's a different amount.
Okay, so how do we arrive at 48 to 60?
That's how our current patrol squads are situated. So we have a day shift, we have a swing shift, and a graveyard shift.
I see.
Based upon the number of officers should be assigned to each of those shifts during overlapping times. The minimum would have every spot filled would be 60. So that is if we fully built out our patrol division fully staffed. 48 is the number based on our 8 police beats. We could provide police coverage in those police beats with 48 in those areas of coverage.
Okay.
Oh, I got one. Gosh, you got one. Okay, so if you could move to the next slide, Manny, for the crime breakdowns. Thank you very much. So this is our crime breakdowns for domestic violence cases requested by Councilmember Ledeju. As you'll see, the highest number is 243E1. So that is a domestic battery where there is no injury to the victim, no visible injury. So that's a misdemeanor. That is our highest volume of crime that are reported for domestic violence. The second highest is 273.5A of the Penal Code. That is felony domestic violence where there is a visible injury to the victim. After those are the kind of the two primary domestic violence crimes that are dealt with in domestic violence cases. But as you know, there's a lot of ancillary crime that occurs during domestic violence incidents. So the third highest is 245A2 of the Penal Code. That's assault with a deadly weapon, not a firearm. So that could be if a suspect hit a victim with a stick, a knife, things like that. Anything other than a firearm that could result in great bodily injury. And then as we go through child abuse with possible GBI. GBI stands for great bodily injury. Obviously, there was one murder case, and you go down one attempted murder case. There was one false imprisonment case. There was 243D is battery with serious injury. That would be if somebody assaulted someone and they lost consciousness or they sustained a broken bone, things like that. A domestic violence case related to a 246 PC, which is basically a shooting at a home, a drive-by shooting would be the common term for it. There was a domestic violence case that was associated to a possession of a firearm in a vehicle. There was also a 417.3, which is exhibiting or drawing a firearm in the presence of a person in a vehicle. And there was one kidnapping case that was related to those. These are the domestic violence numbers that are populated on the Operations Bureau report. Any questions on that before I move on to kidnapping abduction?
Councilmember? I'll save my question for the end. Thank
Okay.
you.
Stop me at any time as I get through. So kidnapping offenses, Councilmember Ledeju asked that we break down those offenses. The primary offense is false imprisonment. That is when false imprisonment is defined as when you do not allow a person to have free movement. These can happen in domestic violence cases as well as non-domestic violence cases where a person wants to leave a bedroom and a person stands in their way and doesn't allow them to leave. Anything where you're restricting that person's movement. That was the highest crime type within the quote unquote kidnapping offense for NIBRs. Again, all of these crimes that we report out in the Operations Bureau report are NIBRs crime. That stands for National Incident-Based Reporting System. That's a nationwide way in which we have to report all crimes nationally, and that's uniform across all police departments. The next one is actually kidnapping itself. There was 18 cases of the 69. That is actually the physical kidnapping is the actual seizing of a person and moving them. So you actually have to not just falsely imprison, not let somebody leave. You actually take the person and you take them to another location. That can be to another location in a house. That can be another location in a vehicle. That can be a variety of things, but it's literally the asportation, the movement of the person against their will. Another one was 5 of the cases, which we had talked about a little bit last meeting, which is child stealing. This is 278 of the Penal Code. That is a crime type where oftentimes when there is custody disputes or custody battles, they will withhold a child, they will steal a child and not comply with a court order. Those are the type of crimes that we deal with when we talk about 278. Obviously, now there's one for each of these. 209B1 of the Penal Code, kidnap to commit rape. That's kind of self-explanatory. The elements of kidnap would have to be fulfilled, and it would be for the intent to commit rape. We had one human trafficking case, that's 236.1A. We had one of those cases that fall under the kidnapping abduction NIBRs reporting, and 236.1C, so it's the C section instead of the A section, and that's human trafficking that is involving a minor. So we had one adult case and one minor case. And again, these crime types are the ones that are required by NIBRS to fall within that kidnapping, abduction category. So that's my report on that. I'll move to the traffic collision fatals that the council member Matias had asked for last meeting.
Before we move on, I'd like to open the floor to any comments from the public about what we just heard, or anything at all, rather. Nothing? Councilmember Matias?
Phone, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So just bear with me as I'm formulating this question, DC Knight. I looked at the January report, and at the time, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There were 7 categories that we were trending upward on. And as of November, the only areas where I still see us trending in the wrong direction are aggravated assault, simple assault, kidnapping, and domestic violence, which we've been talking about going back to last month. So what are your general thoughts on perhaps additional steps or actions we can take to address these 3 areas? Because they've stayed fairly consistent throughout the year. And are there some more general trends that you guys are sort of seeing in your profession of this also being an issue across the country, or is it just like a Vallejo thing? So what can we do is number 1, from your vantage point, and then 2, is there perhaps broader trends that you're noticing that I think perhaps can help inform why we're seeing this data?
So there's an overlap here. If you go back to the Operations Bureau report, aggravated assault and simple assault, those crime types we are captured for NIBRS purposes. This is national reporting. Domestic violence cases are captured within those crime types. That's not the only crime type, but whether or not there's a simple battery on 2 people that don't know each other versus a domestic battery, those are still captured in those aggravated assault and simple assault categories. Because of that, if you look below the subcategories, those are our own specific non-NIBRS numbers that we want to look at. So the reason I say that is we capture domestic violence cases on our own through our own CAD system. It's not a national system. So when you look at the simple assault and aggravated assault, that is accounted for with our uptick of domestic violence. So I think that kind of it roots into the exact topic that we're talking about tonight. And I think in the domestic violence topic, we're going to talk about some updates and some things we are doing and some relationship we are cultivating to address root causes. And I'm happy to talk about that. I think we could talk about that in depth. In terms of national crime trends for assault, I'm not sure. I can do some research on that. I will tell you Vallejo specific when it comes to domestic violence. Again, we talk about this a little more after, but just to give you a teaser, we saw a significant downtrend after COVID. Interestingly, during COVID and after COVID, and we are kind of getting up to where we were at in our 5-year average. It's kind of a reverse bell curve, if you will. So that's not to say that's good or bad, but we have had higher incidents of domestic violence in prior years. So I think what will be interesting to me to see in the coming years as we develop these partnerships that we are, some of the initiatives that we're pushing through to address root causes, not only of repeat offenders, but anytime you have repeat offenders, you have repeat victims oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes. So if we can address those root causes to get those victims services, we anticipate seeing a significant positive trend. The last thing I'll say on that is also when you have repeat offenders, we looked at and we analyzed what the reason for those, what the outcomes of those criminal cases were. Oftentimes, if not all of the time, it was due to the DA not prosecuting due to the victim not wanting to testify. So if we can get those victims some resources that might encourage either A, to get out of the lifestyle and that environment, that very toxic environment, and to not be victimized again from a domestic abuser, or to get them to testify to bring that person to justice. So I think there's some pathways to success for those numbers. I don't know. I guess that's just my initial thoughts on your question.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure we'll explore it more when we get to our main discussion topic for the evening. The second question I have for you is so as you know, we've partnered very closely with your department this past year. We've made several investments, the towers, the security guards, the sheriff's coming in a few weeks. So what would constitute success in terms of the data? Because I think it's hard to quantify, right? We've made these investments that are outside traditional policing. And so where would you see that reflected in this report? Or should we be sort of measuring success by some other measure?
That's a really good question. That's a really good yet complex question, council member. I would say that we got to be careful. And I'm always careful when we report out on crime trends, because you can be reporting a positive crime trend on one end, and that can the following year can flip on you for no very distinct reason. But when you talk about all the things that you just brought up, one of the premier stats that I think, and potentially we can talk about at this meeting, now that we won't, be doing the emergency proclamation, is average response times. We call them our ARTs. That is, for me, important in that is going to be being a good measure of the level of police service that we are providing to our community. Now, an unintended consequence of that, when we have more officers or more deputies that can respond to these calls for service that are likely reporting crime, you may have an uptick in reported crime, right? So then the statistics sometimes deceive you in that, you may have a citizen who calls the Vallejo Police Department and there is 50 calls pending and only 6 officers on the street. That person may say, never mind, I don't want the officer to come after they've been waiting for 10 hours. That's unreported crime that we're not capturing. That's not acceptable. So now if you provide better service, you have that possibility of then capturing that crime that you didn't previously capture, if that makes sense. So I think average response times is a good measure. I think we have to keep a good, strong perspective on this Operations Bureau report, because it is a high level report, but it is a constant report that we're constantly putting out that we can kind of pivot our strategies and things like that. So I think it's best to kind of choose some topic areas and really look at. Let's talk about it. Shooting cases being down over 20% in shooting cases. That's very significant. We know gun violence is a priority crime that we're trying to deal with. So if we can get those murder rates down, that's also very positive, right? But I think really looking at shooting cases, because if there's a shooting and a person does not die, again, it's significantly tragic when a person passes away from a shooting, but that doesn't capture all of gun violence. That's only one small piece of gun violence. So I think really looking at those shooting cases, I'm blown away by the stolen vehicle numbers. I think that's probably a combination of cameras, right? You got cameras out there in every, darn near every residence, every shop, every parking lot. You also have technology, newer cars that are making them harder to steal. You have a variety of things, I think, that are deterring stolen vehicles, because that number, at least in Vallejo, there was a period of time here I can remember we had significantly high levels of stolen vehicles. So there's some good trends to report on. I just want to be cautious on it, because just one time you think you're going good in one area and then you get something coming in another area. So.
No, I get it. And part of the reason why I'm asking is, one, because I want you guys to think about what are some metrics that we can start to kind of report out to the public that are somewhat connected to some of these investments we've made as a council this past year. And then two, I think there is a story to tell about the investments that we have made and how that is contributing to a reduction in crime in some of these categories. Now, some of that stuff is still a question mark, right? And we'll see more of the story this year. But I just want to make sure that as we are signing off and approving some of these investments, there's a through line to something that folks then that the public can kind of wrap their heads around. Okay, these towers or these security guards or the sheriff's office, these things are connected to these categories, and we're seeing the trend. And I know it's not. This is more of an art than a science. But to the extent that we can draw that connection, I think it'd be helpful in just making that connection for folks. So that's all I got for now, council member.
Thank you. Great comment. I do have a few comments with what we just heard. So, DC Knight, I think you hit on something I'm about to talk on. The 474 domestic violence. Are those cases or incidents? Just
Crimes. So
Crimes,
those are
okay.
474
Right.
crimes.
So it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But I think what would be very useful and more meaningful will be an understanding of who are the prolific offenders. So for the unique offenders, how many are there? And also I don't know how much overlap, but I'll be interested to see what's the overlap between the DV offenses and the kidnapping offenses. And so between those two, who are the folks that are doing the most damage out there? And I think that would give us a very sizable chunk of okay, we just need to address these prolific offenders. And if we could do that in a meaningful way, I think that then will really attack a problem. It feels like you already know that. I feel like I'm saying something that you already know, but I think I just want to say that out loud that it's not always going to be, 474 unique offenders. I would be very doubtful. But do you have any kind of a guesstimate of how many are those prolific offenders in DV cases?
Yeah. So again, kind of getting into the next topic area, domestic violence, but we reinserted the packet from last meeting.
Yes.
And we have a pretty in-depth analysis on the repeat offenders from 24 to 25. And we have some pretty significant data analysis around that. So I don't know if you want to talk about that during that topic. We can talk about it now. I can pull that up from.
We can talk about it later.
Okay.
And then I'll just close out with this and reply to Councilmember Matias. So I just have a few recommendations as far as how to think about success. So I think we got to think in terms of two buckets: the outputs and the outcomes, right? So the outputs, we could dwell on this later, but just off the top of my head, DC Knight mentioned response times. That's a good idea. How many folks we got on patrol? That's a good output. And then also those programs and interventions that you mentioned. And then on the outcome bucket, you got the crimes that are happening. But I think what will be very useful also is comparing our averages compared to other cities in the Bay Area and also national averages as well. And this is a knock on anyone. I think improvement is improvement. But also, I've noticed that there's been a drop in violent crime in the Bay Area, and also I think nationally. Still a lot of improvement, but I think we have to take that into consideration. And then the rest of it is just statistics. I know enough to be a little dangerous, but I don't know enough to actually do this. But I know you can do this, right? It's just you got your X variables and Y variables, and then control for all the other averages out there. And I think we could do like an A/B testing or something like that, where we could say with some sort of confidence that the things we're doing are making a difference out there. Again, don't put this on me. I'm not going to do that analysis, but I feel like we could find someone who knows statistics better than me that could do that. But I think the concept is there. We have the data. It's just a matter of actually doing the analysis. Anyway, so that's my spiel. DC Knight, you want to take over?
Yeah, we'll move on. And at the end, if there's anything related to the operations report, we can obviously I would take public comment and all that stuff. That'll spark some questions, I'm sure. Moving to our fatal traffic collision report data requested by Councilmember Matias. Looks like you guys can see it on the screen pretty decently. Councilmember Matias, you're correct. of the 25 fatal collisions that happened over 2024 and 2025, 9 of those, which is a very significant amount, occurred on Sonoma Boulevard. So that is a significant factor that we are aware of. One of the things I talked about at last council meeting, but I had intended to talk about it tonight, is one of the things I learned when I talked to our traffic division is they do have quarterly meetings with our traffic engineering department, which is very good. And again, I mentioned that to you guys at the last council meeting. We are working to find out if, and if not, how we can invite Caltrans to at least some of those meetings. That would be a good improvement or an enhancement to currently a process that I did not know we were doing, which I was very happy to hear about. So that's something I learned through this process. If you go to the next page, this is just basically a list of all of the fatal collisions that occurred. It is the collision type. It's either vehicle versus pedestrian, PED, or vehicle versus vehicle, or a vehicle versus object. There is, I'll just speak very briefly, and I have to be a little bit vague on this, but there's one highlighted one towards the end. That is a collision that resulted in a fatality, but there might be some criminal culpability associated to it. I can't really say much more than that. So that one's kind of an asterisk. A person did pass away. We are just trying to determine it in terms of a crime type. So that is just the data on our fatal traffic collisions. I feel like there was something else I want to say, but I can't think of it at the moment. But happy to answer any questions before we move off of the Operations Bureau topic.
Here we go again. Holiday break, folks. Holiday break. So not to intrude, because I know that's your district. I mean, it goes from like Councilmember Gordon's district up to yours and into Councilmember Matulak's, but the city manager needs to hop on a phone call with Caltrans tomorrow, and they need to do something about that. 9 collisions on Sonoma Boulevard over the past year, and most of those folks died. And that's a state highway. And so, it kind of stuck with me. I'm going to go back in time. There was a presentation that Caltrans made at the council meeting, and they were talking about the repavement program. And they show up a screen. The investment that they were making was $130 million. And I got some gasps. I don't know if it came from you guys too, from my colleagues, because I was like, wait, we're only putting $100,000 into this project when we have most of our crime, most of the accidents, most of the stuff that's happening in our city is happening in the western part of Vallejo. So out of an $130 million project, I mean, it's great that the state is putting all this money in, but why are we not making an investment ourselves to be able to address several areas? And one of the areas I was concerned about was exactly this. And I think that, now the state's going to go ahead, they're going to repave that road. I don't know what traffic calming measures, what lighting, what they're doing on there. And I think that should have been thought through before we signed on the dotted line and that project moved forward, because we have a real problem here and it's not being addressed. So I'm going to reiterate the need for our city manager to immediately ensure that Caltrans is not just attending these quarterly calls that DC Knight just called out, but that they're putting some measures in place right away so that we don't keep losing precious lives on that strip. If we don't do anything about it, you're going to continue seeing those numbers where they are. And this is just one category that the police department is tracking, right? Like fatal collisions, but we have gun violence that's also occurring off of that strip. We have encampments that are not, well, off of on the it's west on White Slough. Well, northwest. Northwest. Yeah, so what I'm trying to get at here is I think that there's a missed opportunity and we have to like dial up the level of urgency on the fact that the state needs to be involved. Because when you're talking about White Slough, when you're talking about Sonoma Boulevard, you've got multiple agencies with oversight of the White Slough Strip. You've got Caltrans overseeing that state road. And so we haven't really done any significant outreach to the state, and the state needs to be involved and the state needs to put down significant investment because we have a lot of issues that need to be addressed and that the state's not really being not just a participant in figuring out how we move past it, but it's also not coming in with significant dollars. And then Vallejo's having to carry all of that. And we're in a resource constrained environment. So I'm gonna end my rant for today. But I will tell you that until the city manager and his office actually take some action, and I would like for you guys to take the lead on that, Councilmember Gordon, you and Councilmember Matula, we need to urge the state to get involved. Perfect. And in this, you know what I would do? I call all of the TV crews, since they like coming in and writing up stories on Vallejo, they should come and they should go and ask the governor's office, why is that happening and there's no state involvement? That's what we should call the media for. They should come and take a look at all this data, talk to the families who have lost folks, and then we should ask our state representatives and our state agencies why we don't have more investment from the state in that area. Because we're the ones who are having to carry all of that forward, and it's unacceptable. So, there's my beginning of year rant. I will conclude my remarks there, council member.
Through the chair, just before you go to public comment, I wanted to, I remembered the thing I was going to, that I forgot to talk about. As part of traffic fatalities, earlier this week, I had an opportunity to talk to our traffic division lieutenant and sergeant. We will be applying for an OTS, Office of Traffic Safety grant. We had foregoed that grant last year when our traffic division was collapsed. That grant gives us the opportunity to do a variety of things. It includes DUI saturation patrol, basic traffic safety enforcement, DUI checkpoints, and something that was brought up at our last meeting, that it gives us funding for a traffic safety campaign, marketing campaign. So that was something that there was an appetite for by Councilmember Ledesju last meeting. So the application and acceptance of an OTS grant would allow us this next coming year to do those things. So that's just the last thing I wanted to add.
Thank you, DC Knight. I believe we have two residents who would like to comment. If you may, could you please come up and speak? But the people want to hear you. No, well, from the people's homes. Oh,
Also,
sorry.
it's
Actually,
for the
we got a
record
podium.
too.
Yeah. All.
Perfect. I get to be higher for once then, I guess. I don't even know if this thing is on. So this is going to seem like I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm not. It's just a follow-up question. I mean, thank you for bringing that up. We did have, I'm in that area, in the City Park area. So that's right where a lot of this stuff is happening. I'm a block off of Sonoma. There was some talk about closing the state streets to Sonoma. I want to say that was 2 years ago or something, Charles, maybe 3. Do you know how long ago that was? And then the last that I heard, I had been CC'd on an email correspondence where I think Caltrans responded that the city engineer at the time had not followed through with like a grant application. And so they weren't going to move forward with the funded survey and completion of that. I wondered if you could give us an update on that, because I do think that that kind of traffic safety intervention would give some more protection for the residential people who were living next to this thoroughfare. So yeah, no, that was it. That was my whole point.
That's a great comment and a great question. I could elaborate that, and I could also give some context to some of the things that Councilmember Matias said. So 100% agree with Councilmember Matias. And it's one of the issues that I really try to I'm putting a lot of energy into, and not always with a lot of success. So I don't usually like to put other agencies or departments on blast, but I have tried really hard to reach out to Caltrans. I had one amazing meeting with them, actually two amazing meetings, but after that, it's just been like radio silence. And I'm saying that because I am starting to get really upset, and because of the things you just talked about. And I think we need to take a much more aggressive role. I would endorse, just over communicate that to the city manager's office about that. But the Caltrans does have responsibility in this, right? Like at the very least, I wanted them to have a presentation, have a town hall, and speak to the community about what their plans are. Because I think they got a really good design. I think they have a really good plan to turn Highway 29 into a nicer boulevard, something that's walkable, that's bikeable, and where people aren't driving like maniacs. So they have a vision, but I haven't seen much since then, right? And I think they need to get in the business of over communicating that. So let's team up and let's try to make that happen. Now, to your comment, so kind of rewind the tape a little bit. The conversation, and I was pushing for this about partially and maybe even just temporarily closing off the state streets on Sonoma Boulevard, particularly between Florida and Alabama. The 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 catalyst for that conversation was mostly because of the sex trafficking that was happening there. And the idea was, well, if the sex buyers had a less easy time to maneuver around there, wave at a sex seller, then that place will be less desirable. And what you said was true. I think there were things that, not think, I know there were things that fell through, and a grant wasn't applied for. But it is what it is now. And then some time has passed, and focusing really back onto the sex trafficking, some other opportunities came up in terms of state laws, and then a lot of my focus has been focused on let's gain the sex trafficking reduction program up and going, which it is right now, which is great. That is not to say that there can be and should be more improvements made around that area, because I know people still just kind of whip around the corner and there are families and kids over there. I get that. We can pick up that conversation. I know, just being transparent, there are some other residents that aren't physically adjacent to Snow Boulevard who don't necessarily feel the same way about having those state streets closed. So I think it warrants a conversation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, do you want to? It would be nice.
I think we have to now. That's a public meeting and online.
You and I went door to door at the time. And I think that at the time, I'm sure you recall, like I had reservations about this being a sex trafficking intervention.
Mhm.
But where the community came together was because of the traffic danger that the pimps and the Johns were part of causing. And so when there are car crashes that happen there, they do actually come into the residential areas. And I know that you've been CC'd on emails with sideshows, people's crashing into the front of people's houses. You know, and we talk not just about closing them off, but also just having some kind of traffic calming. There was something installed in Louisiana. I can't even remember the name for those stupid things that they put. But I know there's a lot of different options.
Yeah, speed tables. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that it's not something that should necessarily be put aside just because of just because the sex trafficking conversation has changed. And I'll be honest, I think there was questionable evidence that would suggest that it would maybe even have helped, especially because we do have girls on Marin. But yeah, I think it would be valuable to revisit it because we do continue to experience it. And we are, I mean, that whole area is residential. As soon as you get out of the downtown, it's all single family homes. So
I
yes.
agree. Let's revisit it. Yep.
Oh. Oh, okay. Sorry. I'll go after you.
I do want to like get through the public comments first. Is there anyone else? Yeah, please. No, nothing.
Please.
Councilmember Matias.
Yeah, so this is not on the this topic. I mean, DC Night is doing a report out at our request because we had asked several questions last month. And so there's two paths here. We can either agendize this and then vote to recommend that the council do XYZ, or I mean, I think there's actions that we can take individually as council members, or we can elevate it at our next council meeting in really sharing with Mr. Murray the need to engage Caltrans. I guess what I'm trying to get at is I don't want this to take 4 to 6 months of talking and voting and this and that when we have a real emergency that is not really being paid attention to. And so, to your point, yes, Caltrans needs to come. They need to do their presentations. They need to tell folks what it is that they're doing over the next couple of years. But that's a 3-year project. There should be lighting that goes up right now because some of these collisions have been because there hasn't been any lighting. There's no lighting on Sonoma Boulevard, especially at night. So there's immediate stuff they have to do now while that project gets off the ground. And then separate and aside from that, I also think we have a responsibility to engage our state representatives and some of these agencies that have oversight above and beyond Caltrans to more aggressively deal with what is a very complex challenge. Because again, it's not just sex trafficking. We got traffic collisions, we got fires in that part of town. There's just a lot of activity that I think Vallejo on its own has had to shoulder the burden for over a very long time, when in reality there should be partnership and there should be collaboration in figuring this out. And that's all I'm saying. So it's like, I don't know how we move this faster, but I think it does need to move faster because we've had 15 collisions, maybe more in December. I don't know what that number is going to be. And 9 of them were on Sonoma Boulevard. That's crazy. And we still haven't done anything. I mean, I was expecting to get a report out from Public Works and we didn't get it this month, but like enough is enough. And so we gotta do something after this meeting. It's all I'm just trying to get at.
I agree, and I will side on expedience than the complete shebang way of doing things. We could do a lot. I think we just need to get together, be more aggressive. We'll be on the same email. We'll communicate to the city manager's office and also the public works director that this is an issue for us, and we'll lead the charge. Right? They'll be CC'd. Hey, we want to talk. Next day, no reply. We need to talk, and keep on doing that until they talk to us, and that's all that is. And I think we could make some headway that way. But you know, we're the dudes in charge. Let's we'll make it happen. Okay, thanks.
That's it. That's all I have for the operate, well, just for the operations report. We got the action item, just the domestic violence case.
Randy, is there another item?
There is one other item, council member, that would be action item 6A, domestic crime violence. Receive a presentation and provide direction to staff.
Okay, so Councilmember Palmeras, I think you might have been absent last meeting. We did the department did an extensive data analysis presentation at that meeting. It's contained in the packet just for reference a second time. During that analysis, we looked at a variety of issues related to domestic violence and the uptick, as we had talked about already tonight. There's a case review summary. There's a variety of charts that talks about from COVID, the downward trend, and then kind of we're moving slightly upward. In 2020, we had 627 domestic violence cases, so we are better off today than we were then, but we are kind of trending back in that direction. On page 15 of 26 of your packet, we had projected based upon that uptick trend, we had predicted in November 54 cases, because at the time we did not have the statistics. And again, like I talked about with Councilmember Matias earlier, we were under that projection. We actually only had 37 cases in November. So the projection, thankfully, did not meet the what we thought it was going to be. So we are somewhat leveling out. Also, based on your question, Councilmember Palmeras, on page 24, we did a deep dive, or somewhat of a deep dive, into repeat offenders. And oh, thank you, Manny. I didn't realize you were doing that. So you have in 2024 we had multiple repeat offenders. So you had 65 cases in 2024 where there was at least 2 or more folks. If you'll look, there is one person who had 6 cases. Also, if you'll look over, you'll see those color-coded ones. There's 2 people who had 3 cases in 24 and 3 cases in 25. So it's 6 cases in a period of 2 years. So subsequent to that data, one of the action items from that presentation last meeting was to look at those repeat offenders. As I had mentioned earlier or alluded to, one of the things we found was the result of those repeat offender prosecutions were the dropping of the cases. So again, I'm just going to go over some high-level action items, and then I'm going to turn it over to Investigations Lieutenant Catham to talk about some of the updates from our last presentation that we've embarked on. To talk about some things related to our partnerships, making some enhancements to our victim resource cards, and some other ideas that we've been working on. One of the other action items was the establishment of a gun violence restraining order program. We talked about that pretty extensively last meeting. Happy to report that we have a working draft guideline of that program. That has been completed by one of my captains. We have shared that with the HR department. They're doing an analysis of it to make sure that there's no impacts to labor or if there is need to be any discussion with labor. So once that is completed, we are going to go ahead and implement that program. That will allow us to seek gun violence restraining orders in domestic violence cases, which we're talking about tonight, as well as folks that, based on the new laws where they make threats of a mass shooting or threats of shooting up a school or some type of other public gathering. We can also seek gun violence restraining orders. And again, to differentiate this from gun violence associated to, say, territory or gang crime or some other type of gun violence, prohibited persons, and if you're a prohibited person from possessing a firearm, like being a convicted felon or addicted to narcotics, things like that, that's separate than gun violence restraining order. You wouldn't need to get a gun violence restraining order because that is a prohibited person. Gun violence restraining orders are for folks who are, in theory, legal gun owners that should not own a gun. You can go to a court and seek a restraining order so that person, due to these crime types, cannot possess a firearm. So I think there is some benefit in domestic violence cases. There's some domestic violence in threats cases and things like that, to where people, if they're engaging in this conduct, should not be possessing firearms. So that is a legal process that we have a policy for. We now have, as a part of this work, have done a program guidelines. So we actually a how-to guide for our officers. So that's positive in that regard. We touched on that. We touched on the domestic violence, repeat offenders. And then a lot of the things that came out of last meeting, which is why we carried it over to this meeting. Thankfully, we had a lot of partners who I think are here tonight and may want to speak. Brought up a lot of issues related to things that we can do as a department to help enhance or improve our response to domestic violence. And that's not necessarily that the police aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. We're going there, we're investigating the crime, and we are arresting the offender. What we need help with, that I think Lieutenant Cathan will talk about, is funneling the needed resources. And that resource isn't necessarily police. Funneling the necessary resources to that victim to help them improve their situation. So again, I'll just wanted to lay the groundwork, and I'll turn it over to you. I can tag team if there's anything else I think of as you go on, Lieutenant Cathan.
Great, thank you. Josh Catham, Vallejo Police Department. I am the Lieutenant of Investigations. Based off the last meeting, what we kind of took away from it was how can the police still do their job, but also impact these victims' lives and try to reduce these numbers and get them resources at the same time. And it was fairly clear that although the police may go to a victim's house and the police may take a police report and the police may or may not arrest someone, that doesn't necessarily solve the problem for the victim. And one of the things we do when we go to these things is we give the victim a resource card. What they do with that resource card after is essentially up to them. And so what we learned is there's probably a better way to do that. And the goal isn't necessarily for the police to go out and make an arrest. Like sometimes we have to make an arrest. We will do that. The goal is to get the incidents to stop. And the best way to do that, instead of us just responding to something that's already occurred, is to get the message out to victims or potential victims, one, before it even happens, or two, if it does happen, they at least have a resource and someone to contact. And it was also made clear, and we know this as police officers, not everyone wants to make a police report and not everyone wants to see the police. And so we're looking at different ways to get resources out there, whether it's through us, whether it's through some community partners, or whether it's through iHeart. And as part of this little investigation into domestic violence, we did a number of things. We, like the DC said, identified repeat offenders, which results in repeat victims. And in the chart you saw, it was 3 main offenders with the same 3 victims. And we're talking about 8 cases, 6 cases, and 4 cases. 8 cases over 2 years is a lot of cases of domestic violence. Every time that goes to court or that goes to the DA's office, it's getting not filed. Either the victim doesn't want to testify, the victim has submitted a letter asking for the charges to be dropped, and so ultimately the case goes nowhere. We need to get that victim in touch with you guys to do one of 2 things: either get her out of this element altogether or provide some confidence with her, and maybe she does go through with the court hearing, if that's the only way to get it to stop. So we took a look at the numbers and identified the apartment complexes with the most incidents of domestic violence. And we're exploring ways to maybe put the word out in these complexes through a flyer or maybe some kind of QR code at the main office where victims or potential victims can scan this thing, get the resources available to them. They're still able to call the police if they want, but if they don't want, we still have an avenue to get them in touch with people that can help them outside of police work. We're looking at updating our resource card. I found 2 different versions of the Vallejo Police resource card, and I got a copy of the Solano County District Attorney's resource card. I turned all those over to the Family Justice Center in the hopes that they would work with us to come up with one resource card, which I believe should be one county resource card, because these are county resources that are available to victims. And it's not uncommon for the city of Vallejo to have a domestic violence victim from another city. And we don't want to just be offering them Vallejo resources if they live in Vacaville or Dixon, right? So we looked at implementation of the lethality assessment protocol. Well, my understanding of this is when we respond to a domestic violence incident, we would have our officers ask a series of questions to the victim, and based off the answers to those questions, we could determine what the lethality level to the victim is. And if it reaches a certain point, the idea would be to get someone on the phone, an advocate on the phone, and put the phone in the victim's hand. So whether we arrested someone or whether the suspect was gone, we are getting this person in touch with someone immediately instead of days later or waiting for them to decide if they even want to reach out to someone. The implementation of this program will not take place overnight. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it actually requires a 2-day training, and then we would have to bring it back to the police department and train our officers. But in the meantime, what we're going to do is we have 2 training days, one at the end of January, one at the end of February. Members of the Family Justice Center are going to come and give a presentation to our officers on how this program works, give them a little bit of background, hopefully get them to understand how this can potentially impact the victims in a good way. And then with that, going forward, when our officers go out to these domestic violence calls, although they haven't necessarily been trained in this thing, the idea would be to get iHeart to also come out for a victim and assist them with resources and direct them to the right places. For the 2 training days, we call those AOT. It would be every officer at the police department. We're probably going to have iHeart attend that as well, so they would have the same training. And then, if possible, maybe some of dispatch, because they are the first ones to receive the information over the phone before sending it out to the police. So those are some of the things we looked at, and we met with Family Justice Center last week or the week before. I think it was last week, and had a productive meeting on how we could start implementing some of these things now and what it would look like in the future once it was fully implemented.
And I just want to, again, echo and thank the Family Justice Center. I want to thank St. Sart for having been here with us from the beginning. You guys are invaluable resources. I think as we continue to strengthen these partnerships, we will have the ability to touch root causes that just simply handling a victim, a pamphlet is not sufficient, right? And I think that's something that is important. That's I think a significant update. I know it's pretty short, but it was actually a lot of work and coordination and a lot of collaboration that went on it. It's ongoing. Again, like the lieutenant mentioned, we have a short-term solution with some training in the next 2 months. We also have long-term solution, this lethality assessment protocol that we want to implement. If we do implement this program, which I do believe we will, it sounds like we will be the first agency in Solano County to have implemented this program. It's currently in action in Contra Costa County, so I'm very proud of that. I do believe that if and when we implement this, and we will, I believe other agencies on Solano County will follow our lead, which that's something to be proud of.
That is some outstanding work. Thank you so much for the presentation. Councilmember Matias?
Thank you, Councilmember Palmares. So, for the organizations that are in the room, if you don't mind coming up again and introducing yourselves, talking about the services that your organization provides, and what role, perhaps, I guess my question this evening is, what role would you see the city of Vallejo playing in strengthening your work in our community? So who are you here representing? What services are you currently providing, if you don't mind? And then if there are actions you believe the city of Vallejo should be taking that perhaps we're not, separate and aside from what DC Knight has shared this evening. Thank you. And by the way, I'm sorry that I'm having you guys go through this again. But we are live streaming this evening, and I just want to make sure this information's out for folks.
I'm Carrie Cordero, the Executive Director of SANSAR. I apologize, I was late today, so maybe all of these introductions have been done. LT, wonderful work. I'm glad you are connecting with the FJC. I had a lovely discussion with Tracy Lamb. She's the Executive Director of Napa News, where they are providing DV emergency response when there is a positive lethality assessment. And at a minimum, they're getting a victim on the phone with a domestic violence victim advocate. So I think we are definitely moving in the right direction. I really strongly encourage everybody to consider putting somebody on the phone or having an in-person response at the time. I don't know that they're all going to happen Monday through Friday when the FJC is open. And I don't know if you're planning on putting people on call to take these calls. I don't know, not my, but certainly however we can help in that. Our agency, we provide victim services for sexual assaults, human trafficking. We provide free mental health services. We have forensic exam teams for sexual assault and domestic violence. Also with the lethality assessment, depending on how they score, I would also recommend considering doing a domestic violence exam. We talk about prosecutions not happening. There is a study, I brought this up last time, but there's a study out of San Diego, just having a victim sit down with a forensic examiner, with a forensic nurse, there's a 33% increase in prosecution. We just get more out of people, right? It's just we're wearing a different hat. We don't have a gun on our hip. I was very saddened after our last meeting, there was a DV homicide. I also think the county as a whole needs to really look at doing death review cases for domestic violence. You know, and not to blame anybody, but so we can learn and we can improve the services that we provide. So I would love to be part of that. And then I'm going to plug, we're having a human trafficking conference January 29th in Fairfield, and would love for everybody to be there. That's all I have.
I have a question for you. So, if there's anyone watching this evening and they want to get in contact with you, how would they go about doing so?
Go to our website, www.sanesart.org.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Nora Martinez. I am a navigator from the Solano Family Justice Center. I am here with my colleague, Reina Sanchez. Oh, sorry. Sandoval. I'm so sorry. Our names are all over the place. I apologize. That's my So again, we are with the Family Justice Center Solano. We are located at 604 Empire Street. We are open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and we are a walk-in center that offers services in connection to partners in the community that offer the direct services for victims of interpersonal violence, so domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, sexual abuse, human trafficking, stalking, elder abuse, if I didn't mention that. We offer a confidential space for survivors, victims to connect with a navigator like myself, share in depth where the situation is, and based on that, make those respective connections to the partners in the community or in our partner communities that are able to take on the heavy lifting and the work. We have anywhere from advocacy support, legal support, mental health support, and long-term programs for safety and healing as well. So a little bit of everything. And again, just to be able to connect, you can call the center 707-784-7635, or you can visit the website at solanofamilyjustice.org.
And just to build on that, we're one of 5 centers, so we're Contra Costa and Solano Family Justice Center. So we know that folks live and work between Contra Costa and Solano. And so a survivor can walk into any of our centers and be connected. I would just say, you know, I really appreciated our partnership and our conversations that we've been having. And I thought you did a great job in terms of presenting what we would do. But really, it's a partnership, and it's a phased approach, as you spoke to. We will be providing by the end of this month some recommendations of a resource card. We will also make some general recommendations based on kind of language and just some recommendations around that. Also, we will be sharing at our FJC steering committee to really propose that we have a countywide resource, trifold card, et cetera, that we can, is what we're encouraging. And then kind of why us in terms of the training, kind of you spoke to. So the training, we have been approved by the Department of Justice to provide training to law enforcement on really improving criminal justice response. And it really is around trauma-informed, victim-defined kind of services and looking at criminal justice response, as well as identifying high-risk indicators. And those were some of the things that you all talked about. We also are certified and trained in the lethality assessment protocol. As you noted, Contra Costa, several law enforcement jurisdictions in Contra Costa have implemented that. The FJC has implemented the lethality assessment tool. And so what that means is, as Nora was saying, when she meets with a victim survivor, we are going to assess need, but we're also going to assess dangerousness. Based on the level of dangerousness, we will then assess lethality and implement a protocol. As Carrie noted, we are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Part of the protocol is really not, we can, as first responder, as providers, we can assess lethality, but really it is this particular protocol, implementing it within law enforcement, it is the intention of contacting a domestic violence provider that is a 24-hour crisis line and possibly a shelter-based organization. So I think our phased approach really is to, as we said, make some recommendations around the resource card or the, and then countywide. The second thing is to provide that 2-day training for what our recommendation is to patrol officers as well as dispatch. And then the third piece is really looking at the enhanced protocols, law enforcement's protocols, and that is building on the relationships that already exist. So our support is just really kind of connecting around these models that work. I think in terms of what the city of Vallejo can be doing, I think this is great. Just one that to be highlighting and really centering some of these issues. When we really center an issue like domestic violence or human trafficking, you begin to look specifically at this particular issue and what's the data, what are the solutions, what providers are there. So I think that's a big part of it. I also agree. I think the death review team is something that should be considered. And as you said, it's not about fault. It's really around looking at systems responses. Again, it's looking at data that I think is really important. Yeah, and I think just really continuing to come together and collaborate and really look at what models are working. So,
Can I ask you a few, you guys, a few follow-up questions? Do you mind? Fine. Okay. Number one, do we currently have a hotline? Very basic level. If someone, and what is that hotline? Where can folks call?
So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the Solano County Domestic Violence 24-hour hotline is your Safe Quest Solano. They are the domestic violence agency. There are also other agencies like VEST and SAVE. However, the 24-hour hotline is Safe Quest, and you can provide it. And then for sexual assault and human trafficking, that is same. Sorry, is that right? Human trafficking. Yeah. And so the 24-hour confidential line for Safe Quest is, hold on, my bifocals, is 866-487-7233, or you can text in the crisis line from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And that's 707-237-8397. And again, let me say that is a partner of ours, that's Safe Quest Solano, that provides that 24 confidential crisis line, and they have the shelter-based services as well.
Second question is, you guys have all referenced advocates, DV advocates. So, are these DV advocates working for each of the organizations that are in the room this evening, or is there some opportunity for perhaps the county or the city to provide some more funding to get some more trained folks in the door? That makes sense.
So, I mean, I will say I will always advocate for funding to support our advocacy organizations. Absolutely. I think especially in this kind of funding era right now, we're seeing a significant cuts to a lot of our advocacy organizations, as well as us. I think what's really important, of course, is funding, but it's a coordinated response. Because what you can do is you can have a bunch of advocacy organizations in the room and none of them kind of coordinate care to survivors. And then what you have is people just kind of going through all of these different doors. So I think that is one of the beautiful things about the intention of a family justice center, is to be partnering with these organizations, and then you have the hold the connections. But there's, you know, some of the really unique services that are provided by these partners are phenomenal. FJC does not do the great work that Saint Start does in terms of those you know, those interviews and those kinds of things. So I think we should be looking at like what funding can support some of that really good work. But I just can't stress enough that I think what's really critical is that coordination of services and not a duplication of services. So.
And then I just want to follow up on two threads from the previous meeting. So, Councilmember Latiju, and I apologize in advance if I'm not framing it correctly. She talked about the delays that sometimes domestic violence victims have to experience in like getting care or being examined by a nurse. And so, who would currently be providing that service here in Vallejo? Like, does that service exist, or do we need to make it available to sort of narrow the window or that folks are waiting to either receive care or to get examined? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let me say two things. I think one of the things that in terms of, so last time what came up a couple times that I remember is response times around law enforcement, right? And so one of the things we talked about at our meeting was why we wanted to train dispatch, right? Because, and we also want folks to really understand the lethality indicators so that folks know when they should prioritize, because remember they talked about prioritizing based on how they go out. So that was part of the intention around training, training folks around that. In terms of service provision, so if you're talking about client services within the kind of victim advocacy work or the FJC, that was one of the things that's really important, is that survivors aren't put on a waiting list, that they're seen when they call, because that's the moment, right? That is the moment when they call or walk in the door. And so, and that is our model, to absolutely talk to folks right then and there. In terms of the patient or kind of medical exams and things like that, I mean, I would really ask Carrie maybe to more speak on that, because yeah, or even Kaiser to really talk about kind of their responses, because I can't really speak to medical, kind of the length of time that someone takes. I know as my own insurance, if I'm going to make an appointment, I'm not going to get it that day. Typically it's going to be a month out. but yeah, so I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that.
Yeah, if you can.
So here in Solano County, our forensic exam teams are trained to do sexual assault forensic examinations as well as domestic violence examinations. We have a fantastic partnership with Kaiser here in Vallejo, where all of the patients we are seeing there, whether they are Kaiser members or non-Kaiser members, for either a sexual assault or exam or domestic violence exam, they do not receive a bill for that. The forensic piece, it is part of the investigation, the law enforcement investigation. So to get a forensic exam, that is a request of law enforcement, but we have a team fully trained to do forensic exams for both.
Right, if they're
Oh, we have within a 60-minute response time, unless we're on another case, but.
And then my final question, yes, of course.
I do think it's really important that we flag that for both of those comments that were made, right? These are cases that survivors are reporting and wanting to follow through with that. There is also the case of survivors whose insurance is tied to their abuser, or whose concerns of receiving health care is tied to a very complex situation. So again, the emphasis is in this collaboration and coordination of care, because when they can't access care or have fear, right? Maybe they can't access it, it's there, readily available. but there is fear, there is concern because of a legal status, because whose insurance it is, because of cost, because of transportation, because of plethora of different reasons, childcare, right? All of these things. It is important for them to have a point of contact that can help them identify what alternative resources exist. And if there are barriers to get connected, someone that can identify what this system currently looks like and where we can tap into support. So maybe folks might not know that this is a service that SINGSAT offers, right? They might not know that DV exams exist. Like that is an opportunity for a navigator or a third part, like the third individual, right? That is holding that coordination of complex who's holding what, who's doing what, to be able to tap into them and be able to offer just those opportunities and those alternatives as well, and those stepping stones to receive the care. So I think it's also just really important that we do highlight that, and that we consider that there are agencies in the community doing the work, La Clínica, Community Care Ole, like there are, yeah, there's telecare, our program through the Family Justice Center that is complete. It's through Vituity. We have a medical branch that offers free medical care and support in lieu of them connecting to a primary care physician, coordinate support to the emergency room, right, if needed and at no cost. But again, these are all things that that exist in our community. The community might just not know where to look. So that coordination of care is pivotal because we all work together. We all have mutual cases. We all receive this release of information, this approval from the survivor to understand that once they come into the center or once they connect to an advocate, everyone knows what services, what supports each agency has, and we leverage those to support the survivor's journey towards healing and safety. So I think that is the key here. It is coordinating care and leveraging each other's resources, especially as we consider that Solano County, Vallejo specifically, is a commuter town. We have folks who are getting harmed outside of the county, and it is important that we also bring into conversation how law enforcement is cross-coordinating with different jurisdictions to really care for survivors. So again, just emphasis on partnership, emphasis on, yes, grants and funding from the city is accepted and encouraged to all, right? Because we want to make sure that we can continue offering these services to those that report and those that are fearful of doing so.
Thank you.
So you had another question.
Yes, my final question is, say we have someone who comes over and tells the navigator, I need to get out and I need housing. So is there resources you have available at your disposal to get someone into temporary housing? I mean, I kind of floated this idea when we were talking about homelessness a year ago, where I said, the city should have a fund available just in case we have emergencies. And so does something like that exist for survivors to be able to tap into, or is that sort of an unmet need?
There's not a clear-cut answer to that. Because we are nonprofits, right? There are funds that can at times be available to cover those costs. However, it's really important to identify that we really heavily rely on the emergency shelters within the community. And that can get really complicated because housing is a highly sought out resource, right? So it becomes a little challenging when we discuss custody orders, right? Or complications around transportation and them dropping off kiddos because maybe the only beds available are outside of the county or are outside of the city where they reside. So it will always be our first step to collaborate with our advocacy agencies that do offer safe housing, that do offer emergency shelters as a step one. When that is not a possibility, we collaborate to identify if there's any funds for emergency lodging. However, those are very limited. At most, it can extend to 2 nights, 3 nights. And even if we partner with 2, 3 agencies, that can only cover a week. What's next, right? So I think yes and no, but definitely a huge need to be able to identify what supports are available for relocation, for emergency placement, for fleeing out, for the need to flee through an alias, right? And really be able to cover all the ground, because it's not a simple let's relocate. It is making sure you're filing the respective documents with the court, right? With the family law, filing respective documents so law enforcement knows that there's no kidnapping charges to be followed up on, right? Like there's so many like bullet points under that it's important to have a discussion with someone that they feel comfortable that it's not going to immediately erupt to a report to police or a report to a systems. So it's difficult. They're there, right? There's not enough because the need is so big. I think that's right.
Yeah, and I think you really kind of lifted up some of the complexity and nuances to the many reasons why folks either stay or what makes it difficult to leave. However, what I will say is a part of our, the FJC's lethality assessment protocol, when we do assess someone that is at high risk, frankly, to be killed, one, we not only tell them that and we tell them what our concerns are, we begin to talk to them about what plan do they want to put in place. Some folks can leave and some folks can't, right? But if they do, one of the things that we have done, of course, as you said, we will lean into our partnerships with partners that have emergency shelter. However, we know many times they're either full or not taking folks or the limitations, as Nora spoke to. So we have allocated money in our budget to make sure that we can lodge folks through Relo Share, which is specifically designed for domestic violence or interpersonal victims. So it's and we can book anywhere, anywhere across the nation. And so, as Nora said, so we allocated money there. And we can house folks. We can also provide transportation. Again, that is for a couple days, but it allows us, because what's a part of the lethality assessment protocol is identifying a plan for the first 48 hours, right? Because part of the protocol is around really wanting to get them connected to services within that time frame. And so part of what that allows a survivor to get away for a few minutes for us to begin to talk about where might you be able to go, right? Do you have an aunt or because a lot of times if folks can't go into a shelter, maybe they can go stay with a relative. We do have a Housing First case manager, so we're connected to our Housing First here in Solano County, so we can connect a survivor to one of our specialists. However, we know housing in this community is really limited as well, so for longer term housing. But I think for those that are at highest risk, we want to find an immediate plan. So, and that does take funding. Yeah.
Thank you. Really great conversation. I do have a few comments. I wonder, and this is an open-ended question, if the forthcoming Vallejo Vision, the violence interruption program, can it be tweaked to allow us to engage that repeat offender? So it sounds like we have a good piece on the victim, but is it a good idea to also overlap that with Vallejo Vision?
The answer is yes. A program like Vision can specifically target domestic violence offenders. The current Vallejo Vision program is a gun violence reduction initiative. So, but that focused deterrence model and the concepts and tenets of a program like that can be catered to any crime type, really. So the answer is yes. We are starting with starting with gun violence reduction, but that concept, once it's in play and once we're up and running, can be grown into a variety of crime types.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do on that. But if any of y'all have any comments about that, by all means, please. Could you? Yeah.
Mention that because I think that it really, if we really look at how do we address the problem, right? And if the issue is being caused by the harm doer or the person who is causing harm, how do we really surround support or interventions around that person? And I think that what I have seen is that when you do And so we know probation does the batter's intervention programs. I also think about supervised visitation and exchange. And that's an opportunity to really provide support to folks who cause harm, because you're holding them accountable. But I do think that that's an important thing to do, is to have some interventions for folks who cause harm. Absolutely.
That's great. I also want to proffer a recommendation if it hasn't been done already, but let's reach out to the DA's office and the Solano County judges. They might have an additional perspective as far as, what does it take to get a DV victim to testify against that offender. Maybe there's something missing, but perhaps you could. Sure.
Hi, everyone again.
Hi.
So I know that's the, Raina elevated the supervised visitation, but as you're reaching out to the DA and identifying other parties to come to the table, definitely seeking out feedback from probation. I know we've had probation bring in survivors that they have identified in their caseload, right? And they are aware of the Family Justice Center as well as a space for support, but they can definitely be the people holding accountable those that have caused the offense and having to be able to put the burden of accountability on them. Just
Perfect. That's a good idea. Thank you so much. So yes, so to, back brief on this. So DA, judges, and probation. And lastly, it was mentioned that there's going to be a 2-day training on this. If it's not too onerous, I'd like to be invited to that. Just be a fly on the wall, show my support, but also just learn some good stuff.
Through the chair to two of your points. First of all, yes, you're welcome to come and observe during that. It's just a couple of hours in the morning. But to your point just a moment ago, the second presenter of those 2 training days are the district attorney's office. So we have some collaboration. So good idea.
Okay, yeah, please. Yeah, just send me an email. Also to identify, Councilmember Ledeju is present. I know you came a little bit late, but do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. I've been listening as I was trying to get here. And apologies that I'm late. So I want to backtrack a moment. And one of the questions that I want to come back to is when we are doing the examinations, again, the problem has been not that domestic violence workers have not gotten there. It requires a police report. And I want to go back to that because I want our police department to rethink about this. I know, if I'm not mistaken, in San Francisco, there's some kind of agreement where those who are doing these examinations can be given an actual police report number so that you can continue the process. I don't exactly know the process, but we need to consider and we need to figure out a different way to handle this so that the moment that DV walks in the door, my hope is through Kaiser, we're not waiting and triaging for hours to come and someone is coming. And if PD can't come, how do we issue that number, that next step so that the process can keep going on? And I'd like for Carrie to come up and speak about this because this is really important.
Thank you for asking me to speak on this. So there is an option for sexual assault examinations. We do report, let me clarify. There is something we call a VAWA exam where the victim does not have to provide details to law enforcement. In San Francisco, a patient can show up to San Francisco General, say I was sexually assaulted. The sexual assault team is activated, they get an exam without having to talk to law enforcement. They also, and this is the caveat, have their own crime lab. We do not have a crime lab here. So we have to give the evidence to somebody, and that is law enforcement. Now, the victim or the patient does not have to provide details to law enforcement. They can just say, this is my name, this is what happened, this is where it was. generally speaking, in the city of Vallejo, it gives us the opportunity to collect evidence before the evidence is gone, and then give the evidence to law enforcement. So that is the biggest issue, is we don't have a crime lab.
Okay, so as an example, you've stated that in San Francisco at, I don't know if it's at SF General Hospital or somewhere else, to be honest. But the reality is, when you're doing the VAWA exam, the domestic violence worker is coming in, really doing that work, and you're taking the information, it goes where it needs to. Here, we have to speak to law enforcement. But is it, while we need to have the specimens go to crime lab, do we really need to have a real conversation with PD to do the VAWA exam and then just be able to turn it over and even write up the report? Is there a world in which that could be considered that would not violate any state laws or federal laws or policy in that work?
Well, we don't have anywhere to store the evidence.
But what I'm saying is, once it's done, when you talk about storing the evidence, is there any way, I'm just thinking outside of the box with Kaiser, is there any way, they collect specimens all the time? No big deal. So why isn't it that this could be a part of the chain of custody where Kaiser can take that evidence as part of the chain of custody? And then the second piece of that chain of custody is to, at some point in time within that day, that PD comes and then retrieves that evidence. And the chain of custody is never broken. It's just being more creative, because what's at the center of this work is the victim. And I can't, because we don't have enough PD, should not mean that we should not collect that evidence, and we need to think outside of the box to determine what else can we do. And I'm directing it to you because, you know, this is your work, and I want to understand, are there laws prohibiting that type of chain of custody?
So
And then we can ask PD about it.
Yes, and I'd have to do a little bit of research. I don't know off the top of my head because we don't do this in our community, but there are laws around evidence storage for hospitals. And so I don't know that Kaiser would want to then become compliant with that. So that's a much bigger conversation. I agree with you. We do want to limit barriers. This is part, and I want to be clear, this is for sexual assault. For domestic violence, we are typically not collecting evidence. We are.
I apologize. I meant sexual
No,
assault.
yes,
You're
yeah.
correct.
I just wanted to clarify,
Yes.
so we're on the same page and everybody listening.
Yes.
We can have a bigger conversation, but it is bigger. We can keep chain of custody, but if we start using Kaiser personnel, then they are also subject to that chain of custody and potential subpoenas. And I would guess, knowing medical personnel in the emergency department, they probably don't want to do that. So I really love the way you're thinking. There are so many barriers to getting care. And I'll just share, I saw a patient, a Kaiser patient, that intentionally went to Vacaville for a sexual assault. The assault exam, the assault had actually happened in San Francisco. We don't go to Kaiser Vacaville. They then had to go to North Bay. Thankfully, I'd already been there for another exam, but had waited at Kaiser, and this is no fault of Kaiser, it's flu season, for 4 hours, and then transfer to North Bay, where I was able to do the exam. And when you just think about all these barriers, I would have given up 6 hours ago, right?
Right.
I probably wouldn't have driven to Vacaville
Right.
to get the exam. So I 100% agree with you. We need to look at ways to minimize and limit those barriers, but we also have to make sure the forensic evidence
Right.
is sound and we can testify to that in court.
No, and I fully agree. And this is why I'm asking the question, because I think I'm quite confident we need to explore what can be the alternative. And we need to explore, when we think about, every system is impacted. every medical system, everything we do is impacted. And the question really becomes, as we are all in partnership and we're talking about this very important work, what are we willing to change? What are we willing to do differently? We can talk about this all day long, but it's going to require all of us to do something different than what we've done in the past in order to be successful with the limitations that we have. And that's why, I'm throwing this out and really broaching it, because I feel like it is worth all of these conversations and bringing the right stakeholders together and saying, what does this really look like in the environment that we live in with the limited resources, when we are saying we care about this particular violent crime? And the reality is, when we think about women, I'm just going to say it, when it comes to our care, when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to sexual violence, there's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of work, but we have to have sustainable solutions. And we can't get caught up in, oh, we don't have enough of this, we can't have enough of that, because then what we're saying is, I'm invalidating your experience and what you're going through. And yet we're saying this over here. And that's not unusual to you. Everybody who does this work, they understand what I'm saying. And so I'm going to push the envelope every time I get an opportunity. I was flying down the highway to get here, and I was texting, I am on my way. So this is really important to me, and I'm going to push the envelope every step of the way to see real change in this area of work.
Well, I'm going to be at your side. So it is important work to me as well. So let's continue the discussion. And more than the discussion, action behind it.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so I'd like to say, to all of you and Kaiser, how do we get together and have this dialogue? Who at Kaiser are the right individuals, decision makers, to come to the table, along with PD, along with all of the organizations who are doing this important work? And so if you all can get back to us so that we can determine, how do we collaborate and really have this conversation that I've just posed.
Thank you, council member. And I do have one parting question. What is the name of this program?
Which program are you talking about?
Just the collaboration with these nonprofits to intervene. Like, is there a name? I mean, this is a program, correct?
Do you mean the protocol?
Yeah.
The lethality assessment
Lethality
protocol?
Assessment protocol?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it seems to be more than just a protocol, or am I a little confused? It sounds like it's a program.
Well,
We're splitting hairs here.
we haven't given it an official name yet. This has been a statistical dive into an action item for the Public Safety Subcommittee. It involves many facets. Happy to give it a name. I think that always helps when we really kind of get down to it.
Yeah, it would just help to have a name it something. I mean, I understand the lethal assessment protocol, but I mean, for what we're doing, the work is a little more broad than that. So I think it just deserves some sort of name. That's all.
Microphone.
Appreciate it. You want to say something, don't you?
Of course. I'm gonna go for another
Go
10
ahead.
minutes. I have a quick question for our city attorney's office. So at the last meeting, one of the attendees talked about the fact that there are some whether it's apartment complexes or whatnot, that they will evict you if you call in, if you're making phone calls reporting domestic violence. And so the question I have for you is, is there anything we could do sort of legislatively to ensure that there's no retaliation on the part of some of these property managers or landlords from there's no retaliation when someone makes that call? I think in the last meeting you guys said you were gonna look into it, or that there was some complication sort of tackling that issue, but I don't know if you had an opportunity or if you're aware of other cities addressing that specific concern that was raised by an attendee.
What could be done and what has been done in some other cities is a just cause eviction ordinance that prevents eviction except in certain circumstances. And we actually drafted such an ordinance during COVID, and council didn't adopt it. So it's been done before. We have the ordinance is what I'm saying.
But we just gave direction for you guys to bring it back
Right.
at the last council meeting.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah.
Okay.
Right, and I understand that.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. So to kind of build off of what Councilmember Palmares and Councilmember Letadrew have shared, I think what we would want to see, and this is to, I'm sorry, DC Knight, because we just keep piling on. But if we got to loop in Murray on this, just let us know. I think that there are some next steps that you guys have all identified in the series of conversations we've had over 2 months now, where you've said we need training for law enforcement, right? We need to implement this protocol and ensure that it's being applied when we respond to these calls. We need to make sure that there's coordination amongst the various like nonprofits that are providing services. And so how often does that happen? Who does it? And like, how are we ensuring that there is a solid flow of information, right? Like that's the next step. You did also talk about needing to update the resource card. And some of the things that, and then Councilmember Palmares was talking about outreach to the DA's office and to judges and bringing in and looping in probation officers. But there's two sort of open question marks for me. And one of them, I think we talked about when we talked about trafficking, was we did elevate the need for us to have an awareness campaign, right? So like, how are we raising awareness around the resources that exist? How is this being offered by nonprofits? How is the city taking a proactive role in sharing this information? How are we partnering with the school district? I think that there is like a scope of work that's unaccounted for that needs to be part of a plan. That's part one. And then part two, I'm gonna keep going back to this like emergency funds. Like, I don't know if we have emergency shelters to offer. We couldn't open up we couldn't activate our extreme weather policy. You asked, I don't know how many meetings in a row, and we were not able to provide housing for folks, even though we had you know an unbelievable amount of rain, and it was cold as all heck. I mean, it was horrible, and it's been horrible since Thanksgiving. And so knowing that we have a limitation on the housing front, if someone needs that service or they need a couple of dollars to get by, where are they getting that funding from if the nonprofits don't have that funding to provide it to folks? I think that that's also an open question mark. So I would want to see, in addition to having you guys like put a name on the program, because there is something coming together here that we've been on a path. In addition to obviously naming this initiative, I do think you guys need to just outline the action plan, assign some timelines, and then some of these like outstanding scopes of works and funding needs that may be necessary to provide support need to be elevated to the council. And it would be great to have you guys share that back with us so we can take a vote and informally recommend that the council consider it. But I think that would be the next step, in addition to, and I think you would also include the just cause eviction as like an item that would help support some of this work. So I think we've got different pieces that we can put together on a one pager and say, here's what we're doing around this, and and these are the timelines, and these are the associated dollars that we need. And then the council needs to have a conversation and consider it in full, because it's an area that we're falling short on right now. So that's my concluding thought on this. I think we've got some semblance of a plan that we now need to put together and then take a formal vote on and move it to the council.
Thank you for those comments. I'm on the fence about that. So I guess my thought question is, can you guys do this and do everything that Councilmember Matias is saying without having to go to City Council for approval?
It depends. It depends on the cost, and what the different funding options are. So much like the sex trafficking reduction proposal, we don't need to go to council. We have found, through the city manager's office, adequate funding within our own budget, to kick off that phased approach. Won't know until we kind of do the dive into the strategic plan, identify the type of funds that would be needed, what would be the timeline. So maybe yes, maybe no.
Yeah. So, I mean, my opinion is I don't want to get in our own way. I don't get in their way. I'm all about expedience here. I understand that there's value in that conversation. And I understand there's value in elevating it to the public, but we're kind of doing it right now, aren't we? So, I would say that if it requires city council vote, I mean, in terms of how much it costs, then of course the guys, let's bring it to city council. But if they could just execute,
If there's part, again, if there's contracts that require a certain dollar amount, that comes to you guys anyway. There's things, at least pieces of this, that would come to you in different arenas anyway. But again, happy to do it however you guys would like.
So again, what I'm identifying here is a next step, right? That's all I'm doing. I'm not saying send it to the council. Like I just repeated back several things that folks are already working on. And what we need to do, not just to hold ourselves accountable, but also to identify additional decision points, is summarize all of this in a document that says, here's the position that the city's taking on addressing what is a public safety issue for us, and a public health issue, really. And then at that point, the city manager can decide, oh no, we've got the funding, or there is another conversation that needs to be had around, like, okay, where do we get the funding to address these other needs that go beyond policing? And that's all I'm elevating at this point.
So do you want to put this to a vote as to whether we should elevate it to city council or not?
We don't have anything to vote on. So I think
Okay.
as the next step, they just need to put something together, bring it back to us, and we may very well
I understand
say,
what you're saying. Yeah.
nothing to do. You guys go and implement that work and just report back and let us know how it's going and how we can be helpful. Or the conversation could be a different one. Actually, we need these many dollars. We need this kind of support. And then at that point, we do have to take a vote. But I just want to make sure that we're moving to action, to Councilmember
Okay,
Ledger's
perfect.
point.
We're in agreement with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, through the chair, I think this action item was for direction from you. That's adequate direction from us to get something started. We can bring it back to this subcommittee in the future.
And what I'd like is you've started a plan and it's just really continuing to build on that plan so that it is well documented and we know what the decision points are. We can hold ourselves accountable. And at some point, if it's not needed to go to council, what I do want to happen, even though, yes, we're the subcommittee, that it is at least brought as part of Chief Ta's presentation of, here's what we're doing. We need to do a better job communicating the things that we're doing and the work that we're doing so that community understands this work is happening. And if by chance you missed it on this day or that day, we want to remind you. And there needs to be that continually updated process and continued way that we're holding ourselves accountable to this collaboration with this community who does the work. And just like I brought up the piece around Kaiser, chain of custody, all of these things, that's not going to happen overnight. And that's a work in progress. And those are things that still need to be tracked as we get down the line and process of identifying all the different kinds of needs. As it relates to resources, the county does have a program called Season of Sharing. So it depends, so the question really becomes, what does that program provide in this county? How can it be utilized in these cases? and what has been allocated. So that is a piece of work that needs to be looked at. And then it's, even if you have to ask the city manager's office for help, it is what type of grant funding is available around this work, around safe houses? And then the other question to the city manager's office would be, what property do we literally have available that we could even consider as a safe house? We may or may not, but we do need to ask the question to determine what is the possibility. So those are some things that I would like us to consider and ask the questions of the city manager. And also, from a grant perspective, you work with iHeart. There are resources that you have that might answer some of those questions around grant funding for this type of work, for sheltering, for having an emergency fund, so forth and on, where you have those dollars. Because it is true that generally nonprofit organizations are cobbling together a night here, a night there. And as shared earlier, when we're having these situations and these challenges, they're extremely complex because they can be life-threatening. And there are many things that have to occur to ensure that someone can safely exit and believe that they can safely exit. And that is part of the issue, is the belief that if I do this, I'm going to be safe and I have support outside of my regular network. So there's a lot to build into this and have partners such as Kaiser, other institutions in this work to really make it viable and to see a decrease in how individuals are willing to flee.
Great comment. This is a question for all of you, but do you know of Carolyn's Place? You ever heard of that? They have 3 or 4 bedrooms. It's not a clean and sober living house, but it's specifically for women, I think for DV. If you haven't heard of them, I'm glad to talk with you after and get you guys connected. And they're in Vallejo. Okay, that's all we have, I think. And so, Randy, what's the next on the agenda?
Adjournment.
All right. Councilmember Matias.
Time out. So I don't know why this wasn't included in the agenda, but we usually get asked, okay, where are we headed next?
Future topics, something
Future
like
topic.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I wanted to bring that up. I didn't know if we could talk about it because it's not on the agenda, but I think we should, or at least
Yeah, go ahead.
offline.
Before we go to future topics, Carrie, can I have you come back? I have a question when I was listening. You made a comment about, it might have been you or you, but about the likelihood of someone making a decision is increased by 30% when a particular professional is present. And I don't remember exactly what you said, but I want to revisit that real quickly.
Yeah, so there is a study out of San Diego County that they did about 6 or 7 years ago. They had a federal grant and they did a pilot study where having a domestic violence victim sit down with a domestic violence forensic examiner increased prosecution rates by 33%.
So how many individuals in that classification do we have in this county that we work with?
How many domestic violence victims?
No.
Or examinations?
Forensic examiners.
I think since we've been offering them for 3 years, we've probably done 3.
And is it what you're speaking to is that when does that intersection happen with the forensic examiner and the individual?
So it's usually, it's usually after a detective has responded either to the call or sat down with the patient. And then usually if there's strangulation involved, they will have them sit with us. The issue with the domestic violence forensic examinations is there's no cost attached to them, meaning, or cost reimbursement. Right now, for sexual assault forensic examinations, each jurisdiction can be reimbursed for a part of the examination. There is no such thing for domestic violence examinations. And so that's a cost. Domestic violence forensic examinations. Yes, we call them DAFIs. But there is no cost allocation to that. So the burden is on law enforcement jurisdictions. So I think that is also a barrier.
So when we talk about reimbursement, are we talking federal reimbursement, state reimbursement?
Cal OES, so state
Cal-
reimbursement. Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so that's a piece of legislation that we need to talk about. How do we move that piece of legislation, right?
Yes, so there was previous money allocated about 2 years ago for domestic violence forensic examinations, and then that money was reallocated. I don't remember where or why, but there was a pot of money. And so the entire state, but here in Solano County, we make that process very easy for law enforcement jurisdictions to get that reimbursement once we have performed an examination.
That's on
Sexual assault,
but not
correct.
on the forensic side because
Correct.
it's Cal OES dollars, state dollars. And so that means that really is a senator assembly conversation.
Absolutely.
So I think that's something we need to follow up on and determine how we bring that forward to our senator, how we bring that forward to our assemblywoman to help us move that forward again to see if what the possibility is for that. So let's have a deeper conversation. And I need more information. I don't know if you have that information so we can begin the dialogue, and I'll be more than happy to contact both of them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So do we just, yeah. Please.
So I'm so excited about all this, and thank you so much for coming. And I'm so excited that the police department has put so much effort working into it. St. Sart and the Family Justice Center. I think I'm a little curious though about the process itself that's going to be unfolding on the ground, step by step. And we're talking about the importance of coordination of services, which I think is 100% something that we experience anytime in any kind of social, economic response. And we're talking about having the presence of a victim, having the presence of like a friendly face who's not in a uniform, who doesn't have a gun. And I think the way that our agendas are structured right now, we're examining this through the lens of after a crisis has occurred, which I think is important. But I am wondering why we're still not calling iHeart routinely every time that one of these things happen to come with the police. And I know that there's a lot of training pending. I know we're talking about bringing them into some of this training, like, oh, maybe they're going to come. But it seems like to me, for domestic violence at least, that they should even maybe be in this room. And I'm sorry if this is an ignorant question, but how are we going to get these people immediately on the ground when this happens in that moment of chaos to be connected to these services? We already know that handing them a card doesn't work, or a piece of paper. Don't we already have a program that we put money into where we have a body that can come and talk to someone and even just get them in the system, check up on them later, see if they have a caseworker? So I just would love for us to utilize this program and make sure that we're making use of what we already have and not reinventing the wheel. Thank you.
I would agree with you that we do have iHeart, and through this work, we have to figure out.
Microphone, please. Councilmember Ledesju.
I would agree with you. I do believe that we have iHeart. I think some of this, a lot of it is around training. It's also around really sitting down logistically, the police department in partnership with all those who are involved. What are the scenario? What is the role playing and scenarios to really see how this works. And I too am curious. Part of the work for me is how you lay it out in that document. That's really important to me because you can say a lot of things, but until I see it in writing and I see it being built out, and then it is how are we executing it? Meaning all the partners are in the room talking about how this really gets executed. And it's not going to be one time, it's not going to be two times, it's going to be quite a few times, to be really frank, to get it down and to ensure that individuals responding to these calls, whether uniform or non-uniform, i.e. iHeart, and those who do this work all the time are all on the same page and understand each and every time how to execute it. And I know it's going to take some work to do that. So for me, it's getting it on paper and then that plan of action, how all of these pieces, all these individuals are in the room and really working through the logistics to make sure that when iHeart shows up with the police department, they're well equipped. Because it makes a difference. You already know that. I don't care who you are. You come to my door and I'm going through this trauma. You have to know what you're doing because I'm already undone and very fearful. And maybe in that moment in time, I'm ready to talk, but it takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes to kind of decompress. And it's like, okay. And if you're not able to articulate and really connect with me, then I'm going to shut you down, especially in these instances. So I think it's going to take some real work to make sure that we can properly execute it in a way that is humanistic and brings forward the results that we hope for as a community. So I thank you for that.
Councilmember Matias.
Thank you. So, I was actually just looking at the notes coming out of the last meeting, and most if not all of the stuff that you guys said you were gonna do in between meetings, you guys actually reported back on and like you got done. So I just want to thank you first of all for doing that work. But I do want to call something out, and that is that we did provide direction, DC night coming out of the last meeting, to have the city manager's office specifically look at safe houses. I just have it in my notes here, and to also engage Cal OES to see if they have some emergency shelters available in our community, and there was no follow through on that. So I would like to. I'm not saying this is you. I don't know what the loop back is internally, but I need representation from the city manager's office at these meetings because you guys are not public works, you're not CMO, and so when we are asking for some follow up coming out of that office, I don't want to have to ask 2, 3, 4 meetings while all of this other work is moving forward. So I am offering that piece of feedback live. And then there was this other piece that Councilmember Letterju alluded to in the last meeting around um, the monies that are being granted by Kaiser and other philanthropic institutions, and like who are we serving, what are the outcomes, and how are those outcomes sort of aligned with some of the issues that we're experiencing. And so to the extent that we can have access to that data and ensure that over time we're moving to that alignment, I think it would be helpful in moving this work forward. And then I'll come back for.
And so I want to acknowledge that I did have a meeting with our Kaiser reps.
Oh, okay, great. Awesome.
They're very responsive and they are working on it. So I want to thank you. I know that we've had this conversation and it is on your radar. So I wanted to acknowledge.
I take that back. Thank you for that. And then the last item is like I would like to see this at our next meeting come back just so that we can look at the progress that's being made. And then the the item that I want to bring back is, if you guys recall, I made a specific request to the council a year ago around $50,000 allocation to have a consultant come in and support the gun violence prevention work. I will be sending you an RFP for review early next week. And I would like for us to have that as a discussion item to formally take a vote on and send it back to the council at our next meeting. So I will send that to you early next week. And then I also want that to be agendized at our next public safety meeting so you guys can give some input, take a vote on it, and then we can send it to the council for approval.
And on the county, I'm sorry, on our resource form, our page or package, whatever it might be, there was a comment as I was listening in made around medical care when you're, when you have joint benefits and so forth and on, and that there are ways to circumvent that. I'll just say that. And what I want to know on our resource card, how can we briefly state that? Because sometimes, and I know you all know this in this work, seeing something is very helpful versus picking up the phone and having to ask, and already you're very reluctant, you're afraid. And is there a way that some semblance of that information can be put there? Is that, you don't have to use your spouse's benefits or whatever the case may be, so that people will continue to move forward in this journey, because that is a huge piece of care, right? So I'd like for us to consider how can that be framed on the resource card.
Hey, thank you so much to all of you. We are all, many of us, infuriated about the warming centers not opening. One of the reasons that the warming centers are so important is because of the possibility of vulnerable people asking for help and connecting. And it is not going to happen the first night or the second night or the third night that they're there. There needs to be some time for people to get comfortable and feel safe. So it's on the agenda for this week. I think that we need to make sure that when they are opened, that they stay open, because it's a real possibility of building some relationships and helping people.
I agree with you. What we have to understand about human beings who have lack, in many communities, there is such a high distrust of government, period. And it takes multiple attempts for offering services and for individuals taking advantages of services. And we need to always remember that there is a very high distrust around vulnerable populations as it relates to government and its services, law enforcement. And we can have the best intentions in the world and we can do all the right things, but that happens to be a very long-standing systemic issue when we're speaking about these challenges that we have not yet been able to overcome for many reasons. And a lot of those reasons are because we start things and we're not consistent, it's broken, and it does not create trust. And that's just the fact of the matter. So I definitely acknowledge, I want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
So to DC Knight and Randy, do you guys have clear direction? Okay. Nothing further? All right. I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 8:21. Thank you.